Okay, I have here in my hands my novel. I mentioned that some time ago my dear niece Katie Becker asked me if I'd read some portions from my books or my writings, or my novels or whatever, maybe, other stuff. So to be interesting and fun, and I thought so too, maybe, and I thought I'd give it a shot. This is titled The Sexy Lady, and that's the name of the boat in the book, in the story. I don't want to disappoint anybody, but doesn't refer to a woman or a lady. Pete kind of got tricked into naming his boat The Sexy Lady, because he resurrected an old abandoned boat and started out for Alaska in it. But he did take along a passenger, a lady passenger. And some people might think she was the sexy lady, but I don't know anything about those things, and it's the name of the boat anyhow. And there's that lady passenger. She had a lot of money, and Pete was broke, so she offered to pay some of the expenses if he'd take her along with her 14-year-old son. Anyhow, it's quite an adventure that he had when he started north, when he started to work on that boat and get it ready and all. And this is chapter 1. I'd like to go to Alaska in that boat, Pete said. What boat? That green one. Doc took off his glasses and stepped to the window beside him. What green one? That big old green ketch out there. That boat? Are you crazy? Well, Doc, you said I was healthy as a horse and could do whatever I wanted to. Well, that was 3 minutes ago, Pete. Pete, that boat's made out of concrete. It's cement, Doc, if you please. Not concrete. Ferro cement. From its looks, it has to be a good sailor. It's stable and heavy. It's heavy, all right, Doc said. So's a sidewalk. That's what cement's for. That's what concrete's for. Sidewalks and stadiums and highways. You can't sail a highway. I could paint a yellow line down the middle of it, Pete said. You'd never even know it was a boat. Funny, Doc said, real funny. What do you know about sailboats? Concrete sailboats in particular. Cement, Doc. I've been studying all about boats like this. They last forever. Well, that boat's been sitting there for 2 years. Nobody's touched it. It hasn't sunk, has it? Pete said. It still sits on an even keel. Most boats you neglect and leave alone for 2 years, they're going to leak. They're going to list, and they might just fill up and sink. Pete, that boat, that tub has been sitting there locked up tight as a barnacle. Nobody has the least idea where it came from. One bleak November morning, when Todd comes to work, he finds it sitting out there and nobody around. He couldn't even find a name on the thing anywhere. Somebody owes 2 years' worth of slip rental on it. I could maybe buy it for the cost of the slip rent, Pete said. Pete, give me one good reason why you should go to Alaska. Well, let's pretend I want to go hunt for gold. I want to go up the Stikine River maybe and hunt for gold. Doc said you're more likely to find a bucket of money on your doorstep some fine morning. If you remember, the gold rush took place a few years ago. Well, that's still as good a reason to go as any, Pete said, if you've got to have a reason. I don't need a reason. I just want to go. Doc, I've always wanted to go. My Uncle Thor went up the Stikine River in the gold rush. Tough old Thor Erickson. Everybody said he was tough as boot leather. He said they ran like chickens up all the way up the Stikine River to Telegraph Creek. And they went right past a whole bunch of creeks that had gold in them. They still have gold. Pete, sit down and listen to some sense, some reason. Even if you could buy that boat, it'd take you 6 years to get it ready to go 6 feet. Now, Doc, like I said, that kind of boat can sit a long time without any real damage. Wood boats, you're scraping and painting and varnishing all the time. Everybody else has gone fishing and you're still scraping and painting and getting ready to go fishing. Well, Doc said, everybody says it's fun to work on a boat. Sure, it's fun, Pete said. It's also fun when you stop hitting your thumb with a hammer. Yes, I like the feel and smell of a wood boat until it gets full of dry rot and all moldy. This boat, if rust doesn't work into its steel mesh in the framework, time doesn't hurt it a lick. No, Doc, we're not talking about a wood boat that's all chewed up by tornadoes. This boat, any worm that tries to eat it will break its teeth. It's neglect-proof, almost. Pete, forget this boat. Take a trip in a big fat cruise ship. Take a cruise to Alaska, or else go down someplace in the sunshine and warm up your bones. Cruise ship's my foot, Pete said. People don't do anything but sit inside on those things and eat. They go on a cruise and sit inside and play cards and watch television. On a cruise, they sit inside in a casino and gamble. They're nuts. No, Doc, don't stick me in with that kind of people. Anyway, a cruise costs a whole pile of money. Doc peered over the top of his glasses and then stuck them in his pocket. He used them to read small print and to write prescriptions that nobody on earth can read except Hank Walton down at the drugstore. Doc had 4 or 5 pairs of these glasses and could never find any of them. He was still thin as a rail and still had enough hair at his age to run his fingers through. And whenever he couldn't find his glasses or he was puzzled about something, he ran his fingers through his hair. He didn't really scratch his head, he just ran his fingers through his hair when he was puzzled, like now. Pete, he said, I know how you loved Annie, but she'd be doing flip-flops in her grave if she knew you had this crazy notion. No, Doc, no, I don't think so. She'd say, okay, go. But anyway, we can leave Annie out of this. All right, Doc said. I sure don't say you should forget Annie. I know you won't and you can. You never will. But you maybe ought to find some woman who's got a decent boat. How about that? Sure, I'd make a real catch, Pete said. You would, Pete. Listen. The church has a bunch of widows. The whole town has a bunch of widows. You could open a store in widows. That's not fair, Doc. Not fair to women, I mean. The way things work out, with so many more widows than single men, women living longer, well, that's all the better for you, Doc said. Find a rich widow with a good boat. Doc, don't be ridiculous, Pete said. And then the thought of his debt, his mortgage, his empty bank account, and the retirement with empty pockets, it ran through his mind. He and Annie had loved their house overlooking Boknaberg Bay with a view across the water to the Olympic Mountains. Her long fight with cancer, 18 months with many operations, and long stays in the hospital wiped out their insurance. And after their insurance evaporated, Pete still had $177,000 worth of medical and hospital bills. He whittled at his debts by selling his 2 fishing boats, an 18-foot Rhinell and a 12-foot little J.C. Higgins Ted Williams model Sears Roebuck boat. He kept his 14-year-old Ford pickup, but the one new car that he and Annie had ever bought. Annie's VW convertible, her Volkswagen convertible. He sold that. And finally he paid off all his debts by making a big loan on his house. They had paid off their initial mortgage, a GI loan, at 4% interest, and his new loan carried 12% interest. Pete had fallen behind 4 months in his payments, and 8 more months and he'd be facing foreclosure. Pete Erickson looked too young to retire. His hair was still black and his forehead was only an inch higher than when he was 20 years old. He felt strong. He looked strong. Even so, his daughter and Doc Whitney had both urged him many times to have a good checkup. And at long last, when he retired, Pete gave in to their wishes. Pete liked to talk with doctors. He appreciated what doctors did for people, especially for children, but he didn't like to go to doctors for doctoring, particularly his good friend Doc Whitney. But he did so. Doc checked him over, examined and checked the basics in his own humble office, and in addition he sent a whole hatful of samples, specimens and whatnot, to the laboratory for analysis. And when he got his reports back and had his reports in hand, he called Pete in for the good news. "They're all great," Doc told him. "Pete, you can do whatever you want to. Go where you want to, go to bed when you want to, get up when you want to. You can eat what you want to." "Bacon and eggs?" Pete asked. "All you want. You're healthy as a horse," Doc said. "Any idea what you want to do?" That's when Pete went to the window overlooking Olson's Marina and told Doc what he'd like to do. Sail to Alaska. Even with his empty pockets, that abandoned boat might still make it possible if he could just get a hold of it. But still, the thought went through his mind. A rich widow with a boat? "Do you know any rich ones?" he asked Doc. "Well, a dozen more or less," Doc said. "Been left well fixed." "Around here?" Pete said. "Not likely around here much. Most of our fishermen aren't well heeled, and they don't leave a bunch of money behind when they die. Anyhow, I'm not anxious to marry some rich old widow, even if you could find me one." "Well," Doc said, "then find yourself a young rich old widow." "I like your expert medical advice, Doc." "Well, if you don't want to do that, then go save something. Enlist in a cause. The world's got a lot of causes. Enlist in something." "Thanks, but no thanks, Doc. The word enlist makes me nervous. Pete, I just don't want to see you go kill yourself on some kind of a fool boat trip." "Where do you grow all this caution, Doc? Does it come in a can or what?" "I've had it all my life. Take it slow, take it easy, watch out, be careful. I've been a real Captain Caution." "It's not crazy to want to go to Alaska." Pete pulled on his slicker and reached for the door of Doc's office. "See you later, Doc," he said. "Well, now, where are you going?" "I'm going down to talk to Todd about that boat." "Pete, don't go do anything dumb." End of chapter 1.